Welcome to the world of Dreamside Traveler. Here, beneath the soothing sound of gentle rain, we journey through time and space, uncovering the mysteries of the past and diving into the most captivating pages of human history. This place is created for those who love exploring the world in the quiet of evening, for those who value peace while yearning to discover something new before sleep. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please give this video a like. It helps other people find our stories. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers in our club of nighttime history lovers. And the Dreamside Traveler channel will become your faithful guide to sleep. We're constantly adding new stories for your peaceful evenings. And if you have ideas about which historical topics interest you, or simply want to share your thoughts, leave comments below the video. I'm genuinely curious to know what inspires you. Now close your eyes. Feel this gentle rain outside your window. Allow yourself to relax. Our journey begins right now. Imagine, dear dreamer, that you and I are standing together at the edge of the world, not outside, but inside, wrapped in night's soft hush. We drift down not into sleep, but into a story carried by the gentle weight of salt water, science, and one woman's stubborn curiosity. The sea is calm tonight. The stars, almost close enough to touch, watch over us as we follow the footsteps of someone who dared to ask the ocean its secrets. A woman who asked questions nobody else had thought to whisper to the waves. This is not a tale of princesses or marble palaces. There is no red carpet waiting, only a woman with wild curls tangled by the wind, lips tinged with salt, and a mind sharp as any blade. She didn't win the hearts of kings or sway crowds with pretty words. Instead, she did something even braver. She noticed things. She waited and watched, patient as the tide, and in her quiet study, she saw wonders hidden from the rest of the world. Her name was Jeanne Villepreux-Power. She was the woman who, long before Jane Goodall sat among chimpanzees or Marie Curie unraveled invisible light, kneeled beside glass and peered into the silent world of the sea, listening with her whole being. Jeanne's story began on a morning in late September in the year 1794. She was born in a tiny village called Juilac in the Corrèze region, where the hills roll softly, and the air carries the earthy scents of fields and stone cottages. Life here was as simple as it was hard. Jeanne's family had nothing but each other. A father who made shoes and a mother whose hands never rested, forever working to feed too many mouths. Little Jeanne owned neither fancy toys nor books. Even her shoes, the work of her father's hands, were always a little too small. But she possessed something far rarer, an unstoppable, burning curiosity. As other children practiced their bows and stitches, Jeanne wandered the forests and meadows. She touched every leaf and pebble, collecting bones, stones, bugs, and bits of shell, storing their colors and shapes in her memory. She didn't know their names yet, but she remembered everything. And she learned, in those early years, something more valuable than any lesson in a classroom: how to look, truly look. When Jeanne turned 18, she made a decision that would have terrified most. She left her village, no horse, no coach, only her 2 feet and her hopes, and walked more than 400 kilometers to Paris. Just picture her, a slim girl with blistered heels, carrying nothing but a bundle of clothes, determination, and whatever invisible compass pulls dreamers toward greater things. Paris in the year 1812 was bursting with noise and hunger for ideas. Napoleon ruled. Art and science danced together in crowded salons, and the streets buzzed with ambition, and sometimes the not-so-pleasant perfume of city life. Jeanne, practical as always, became an apprentice in a dressmaker's shop. No ordinary one, but a studio where silk and lace flowed for the aristocracy. Her fingers were quick and patient, her eyes sharp for detail. In no time, she was sketching and sewing gowns for those who walked in high society. But even as her hands traced patterns in satin, her mind kept wandering elsewhere. She watched the play of light across the floor, the twist of a petal, the delicate curve of a shell. Patterns whispered to her everywhere, spirals in snails, symmetry in flowers, order hiding in chaos. Then in that bustling city, she met James Power, an English merchant with an open heart and an even more unusual mind for the time. He was never frightened by a woman's intelligence. They married in 1818, and soon life swept them away from the noise of Paris to the island of Sicily. Sicily, kissed by sun and volcanic fire, was unlike anywhere Jeanne had known. The sea was not gentle, it roared. Here, finally free from the tiny needles and endless ribbons of her old trade, Jeanne gave herself to her oldest love, nature. She collected seashells, stones, strange little creatures. She marveled at hummingbirds, pressed ancient fossils between her fingers, and grew bolder with every discovery. But it was the ocean, restless, secretive, alive with colors and movement, that truly stole her heart. Now listen close, because this is where the story truly changes. Back then, the science of the sea was almost a mystery. Most naturalists studied marine creatures only after they had been pulled from the water, lifeless and pale, their magic drained away. These men wrote treatises about animals they'd never seen alive, making wild guesses about how they lived or moved. But Jeanne was different. She asked herself, what if we didn't have to kill them to learn about them? What if we could watch them, quietly, as they lived and loved and built their secret worlds? And so, in the year 1832, Jeanne did what no one else had dared to try. She built the world's first glass aquarium. Not just a bowl, but a true miniature world, a place where sea creatures could live, breathe, and reveal their mysteries. She built 3 versions. One was small, perfect for careful study indoors. The next was larger, with a clever flow of seawater, allowing for more natural living conditions. And the last, boldest of all, was a massive cage she placed right in the sea itself. A kind of underwater pen, something like the ocean farms of today. Suddenly, the secret lives of sea animals were not lost to death and drying. For the first time, someone could watch a fish swim, a crab scuttle, a jellyfish pulse with life, all from the safety of dry land. It was a revolution, and it was all thanks to one woman, who refused to accept the usual way of doing things. Jeanne's most famous work involved a mysterious little octopus called the Argonaut, or paper nautilus. All the men of science believed the Argonaut stole its delicate shell from another animal, squatting like a thief. Jeanne thought otherwise. She placed an Argonaut into her aquarium and waited, eyes patient and unblinking. She watched for days, breathing with the tides, until at last she saw it. The Argonaut secreted its own shell, slowly and skillfully, molding it from its own body as a potter shapes clay. She wrote down everything. Her careful notes, detailed sketches, and observations proved that the Argonaut was a builder, not a burglar. Her letters traveled across Europe, reaching famous scientific academies. At first, many dismissed her, reluctant to admit that a woman with no university degree and no formal title could append decades of certainty. But the truth could not be denied forever. In time, even her doubters were forced to agree. Jeanne became a member of the Catania Academy of Natural Sciences, the first woman ever to join. She published papers, wrote books, and sent questions and answers to other curious minds all over Europe. Her fame grew, not like fireworks, but like dawn, slow and steady. But then, one stormy night, fate turned cruel. In the year 1838, as Jeanne traveled back to London, a trunk holding all her life's research, notes, drawings, delicate specimens, was lost at sea. Years of work disappeared in a heartbeat. Jeanne was heartbroken. She did not start again. She continued to study, yes, but more quietly. Her bright legacy, once shining, began to fade like a ship slipping beneath the waves. By the time Jeanne died in the year 1871, her name was nearly forgotten. Her glass aquariums, her discoveries about the Argonaut, were credited to others, and history, as it so often does, allowed her story to drift into darkness. But history, dreamer, is a tide. It ebbs, it flows, it always returns. Many years later, in the 20th century, a French marine biologist named Daniel Gurevitch found Jeanne's name again. Suddenly, Jeanne Villepreux-Power began to reappear, first in scientific journals, then in museum displays, and one day, even as a playful sketch in a Google Doodle. Her glass aquariums were rediscovered as the seeds of modern marine biology. Her life became an example to new generations, especially young women who wondered if they, too, might peer through glass and change the world. Jeanne's story, hidden so long, rose up like a nautilus from the sea floor. Tonight, as you listen to the soft hush of your own breath, remember Jeanne, not as a queen, not as a conqueror, but as a gentle rebel who believed the ocean still had secrets to share. She taught us that observation is a form of courage, that patience is not weakness, and that even the smallest creature is worthy of our wonder. Maybe as you fall asleep, you will dream not of empires or golden crowns, but of clear water swirling in a glass, of tiny shells being made from nothing, and of a world forever changed by a woman who watched and waited and saw. Now, dreamer, don't walk, let's take off together. Listen. The air is humming, the propellers are spinning, and through the thin glass of a cockpit you feel the world slipping away below. The sky is blue, endless, wild. There's a whiff of fuel, of old leather, of wind and something else. Courage. We're not in a castle or a cell tonight. No velvet chairs, no golden crowns. Tonight we're flying. side by side with Amelia Earhart, the woman who, with every flight, reimagined what was possible for women, for anyone who dared to look up. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on a warm July morning in the year 1997 in a place called Atchison, Kansas. Her first home wasn't grand, but it was lively. Her father Edwin loved his family, but he fought battles with alcohol and luck. Money came and went, sometimes barely enough for the bills. Her mother Amy, though born into comfort, chose to raise her girls wild and free, without corsets, without hushes or rules about being ladylike. Amelia was never a quiet child. She was curious, bold, a little bit reckless. Imagine her, young, with dusty knees and a big, toothy smile, building wooden ramps in the backyard, launching herself off rooftops, chasing after dogs, collecting beetles in jars. She wore pants, climbed trees, aimed a .22 rifle at rats in the barn, and ran faster than most boys. If she was told to smile, she grinned only wider. She saw her first airplane at a fair, but it was just a rickety pile of wires and wood, no magic yet, just curiosity. For Amelia, the sky was still just a blue question mark. Her schooling was scattered. She started college at Columbia University, left, tried again, and left once more. She was smart, quick, restless, always searching for something that felt like home. When the world went to war, Amelia volunteered as a nurse's aide in Toronto. There, tending to soldiers broken by battle, she learned about bravery, loss, and the weight of duty. But it was after the war in 1920 in California that fate found her. At an air show, a pilot offered Amelia 10 minutes in the sky. That was all it took. Up in the air, she felt it, freedom. Wind in her hair, the earth small below, her heart pounding with possibility. As soon as I left the ground, she said, I knew I had to fly. Flying was expensive, very expensive. So Amelia worked every job she could. Truck driver, photographer, stenographer. She saved every penny for lessons. She learned from Netta Snook, one of the first women pilots, someone as bold and stubborn as she was. Amelia cut her hair short, bought a brown leather jacket, and slept in her flying clothes to make them look worn, like the clothes of a real pilot. In 1922, Amelia bought her first plane, a yellow Kinner Airster. She called it the Canary. That same year, she set her first record. She flew higher than any woman before, to 14,000 feet. Up there, among the clouds, Amelia wasn't famous. She was just hungry, for more sky, for more firsts. Then, in 1928, a call came that would change her life. A wealthy woman, Amy Guest, wanted to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. Her family said no, it was too dangerous. So they needed a woman with the right look, the right story. They called Amelia. She didn't fly the plane on that trip. She was a passenger, along with a mechanic and a pilot. Still, she became the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. Newspapers went wild. They called her Lady Lindy, after Charles Lindbergh. Amelia didn't like the nickname, but she understood what fame could bring: money, attention, and a chance to make real change. Amelia wrote a book, toured the country, gave lectures, posed for photos. She knew how to use the spotlight, but her real love was flying. With the money she earned, she bought more planes, planned more flights, and helped other women pilots. She wanted a world where women flew as freely as men, and she was ready to fight for it. She became an editor at Cosmopolitan magazine, back then, a serious place for ideas. She promoted commercial air travel, helped design practical, stylish women's clothes, and used her voice to open doors for other women. She married George Putnam in 1931, but on her own terms. Before the wedding, she wrote him a letter, her manifesto. "I will not hold you to any medieval code of faithfulness, nor shall I consider myself bound to you similarly." For Amelia, marriage meant respect and independence, not ownership. In 1932, she finally took the risk that made her legend. Amelia Earhart became the first woman and only the second person ever to fly solo across the Atlantic. She flew alone in a tiny red Lockheed Vega. No co-pilot, just a thermos of soup, a can of tomato juice, and fierce resolve. She flew through icy storms with a cracked windshield, almost blind from the cold and fatigue. She landed in a green field in Ireland, shivering, soaked to the skin, and stepped out into history. The world cheered. President Herbert Hoover gave her a medal. France made her a Knight of the Legion of Honor. But the true prize for Amelia was knowing she had made the world a little wider for everyone who dreamed of flying. Amelia didn't slow down. She set more records, coast to coast, speed, altitude. She encouraged women to study science, technology, engineering, and math long before anyone called it STEM. She helped create the 99s, an organization for women pilots, and became its first president. She became the first person, not just woman, to fly solo from Hawaii to California. Over 2,000 miles of open ocean, a feat no one had ever tried. People said she was reckless. She was. She was careful, methodical, a planner. She studied maps, checked every nut and bolt, measured fuel with care. She knew every flight meant risk, but she embraced it. For her, flying was worth the fear. In 1937, Amelia Earhart decided to try her boldest flight yet, a trip around the world, following the equator, the longest route possible. Her plane was a silver Lockheed Electra. Her navigator, Fred Noonan. They took off from Miami in June. The journey was long, over South America, across Africa, India, Southeast Asia. They made it as far as Lee, New Guinea, 22,000 miles behind them, only 7,000 to go. Their next stop was a speck in the Pacific, Howland Island. On July 2nd, Amelia and Fred lifted off into the dawn. The radio crackled, then faded. The U.S. Navy searched for weeks, but there was no trace, no wreck, no signal, nothing but open sea and unanswered questions. Some say Amelia crashed and sank. Some dream she survived, stranded on a tiny island, waving at passing ships. Others imagine she was captured or quietly changed her name, living out her days in peace. The truth is, we don't know. Maybe that's the point. Amelia Earhart's journey didn't end with her disappearance. Her spirit never landed. She became a legend. She was not perfect. She was clever, sometimes shy, sometimes stubborn, fiercely private but unshakably brave. She did not beg for a place in history, she flew straight into it. She made space for women in a world that kept its skies closed. So now, as you drift toward sleep, listen for the soft whir of a distant engine. Let Amelia's courage circle above your dreams. Remember, sometimes the sky isn't a limit. Sometimes it's just the beginning. Close your eyes and step gently into a world painted with shadows and sunlight, where every wall holds secrets and every color breathes. You are in Coyoacan, Mexico. The air is alive with the sound of birds, the scent of wild flowers, and the deep blue of the house, where a girl named Frida Kahlo was born on a hot July day in the year 1907. The blue house, the Casa Azul, would one day become a shrine to art and courage, but for now it was simply home. Even as a child, Frida seemed to shine with something fierce and stubborn. When she was 6 years old, illness swept through her like a storm. Polio left her with one leg thinner, a limp she carried all her life. Other children stared, but Frida met their gaze with proud, dark eyes and pressed forward, dressing herself in bright ribbons and flowers, claiming her difference as a badge. Her world was one of music, laughter, and politics. Mexico itself was transforming, revolutions rumbling through its streets, people fighting for their voices. Frida's father, a photographer from Germany, taught her how to see, to look for patterns, to watch the way the sun spilled through the windows and left gold on the floors. At the age of 18, fate struck again. A terrible accident, her bus colliding with a streetcar, left Frida's body broken in dozens of places. Her spine, her legs, her pelvis, pain invaded every part of her. For months she lay in bed, barely able to move. Her world shrunk to the size of her bedroom ceiling. But here, in this stillness, something extraordinary began. Frida's mother set up a special easel and a mirror above her bed. With her body bound in plaster and bandages, Frida looked up and met her own eyes. With every brush stroke, she transformed her pain into color, her loneliness into vision. "I paint myself," she once said, "because I am so often alone, and because I am the subject I know best." Painting became her way to survive, to shout when her voice failed, to leave proof that she was here. Her early paintings, self-portraits, vivid and unafraid, were different from the huge murals of her time. While others painted stories for the world, Frida painted the hidden stories within her own heart. She blended Mexican folklore, indigenous symbols, and dreams into images that were both beautiful and haunting. Her art was honest, sometimes painfully so. In The Two Fridas, she showed her own heart split in two, each half loving and bleeding in its own way. In Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird, her neck is ringed with thorns, her gaze is direct, and the pain is clear, yet so is the strength. As Frida healed, she re-entered the swirling world of Mexico's artists and revolutionaries. She met Diego Rivera, the famous muralist, whose paintings covered walls across Mexico and the United States. Diego was a giant in every sense, 20 years older, loud, full of life and hunger for art. Their love was wild, sometimes joyful, often stormy. They married, divorced, married again. There were betrayals, broken promises, but also a partnership built on creative fire. Frida wrote to him, "I love you more than my own skin." Their life together was a dance of art and revolution. They traveled between countries, meeting with poets, communists, thinkers. Yet Frida's heart always ached for Mexico, for the taste of spicy mole, the heat of sunlight on her skin, the music of language and laughter. "I am not sick. I am broken," she once wrote. "But I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." As the years passed, Frida's pain deepened. Surgeries left scars across her body. Her spine was bound with steel corsets, her legs wrapped and braced. But still she dressed each day in bright Tehuana dresses, with flowers and ribbons in her hair, proclaiming her heritage, claiming her right to beauty even in pain. She painted what others would have hidden: her wounds, her loneliness, her longing for children she could not have, her hopes and her fears. In the broken column, her body is split, her spine replaced by a crumbling pillar, nails piercing her skin, but her eyes fierce and unyielding. Frida's voice grew bolder. She welcomed other artists, revolutionaries, and outcasts into her home. She painted her friends, her dreams, her pain. She argued politics, embraced leftist ideals, and found power in her Mexican identity. Even as her body failed, her art only burned brighter. In the last years of her life, as illness pulled her closer to the edge, Frida refused to be silenced. She attended her final art show lying in a hospital bed, laughing and singing with friends, refusing to let pain steal her moment of joy. In her diary, she scribbled, "Feet, what do I need you for when I have wings to fly?" Frida Kahlo died in July of 1954, only 47 years old. Her last words were filled with both sorrow and hope. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." But she did not really leave. In every bold brushstroke, every flower she painted, every scar she showed the world, Frida lives on. Look one last time at her fearless portraits, her face both wounded and strong, her eyes unafraid. She once said, "I paint flowers so they will not die." And so she, too, will not die. Her spirit whispers to anyone who feels broken, anyone who aches to turn pain into something beautiful. Tonight, let the spirit of Frida Kahlo light up your dreams, dreams of color, of courage, and of the power to bloom, even from the deepest wounds. Close your eyes. Imagine a horizon so wide it feels endless. The air is dry, painted with sunlight, and the earth glows red and gold beneath your feet. Out here, every shadow is sharp, every sound is clear, and the silence is a living thing. This is the world of Georgia O'Keeffe, the woman who saw beauty where others saw only emptiness, who transformed the desert's quiet into thunderous color. Georgia was born in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, on a chilly November day in the year 1887. Even as a child, she moved through open fields with a restless spirit. She studied the arch of each stem, the sway of grass in the wind, the deep blue of a summer sky. She did not care for the rigid rules of her time. Georgia wanted to look at the world in her own way. She drew, she painted, she dreamed. Her teachers at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Art Students League in New York praised her skill. But for Georgia, art had to be more than copying what she saw. She wanted to feel every brushstroke, to find the soul behind every petal and stone. In the early 20th century, she began sending her charcoal drawings to a photographer named Alfred Stieglitz in New York. He was captivated by the honesty in her lines, the way her art seemed to pulse with secret energy. He showed her work in his gallery, and soon Georgia traveled to New York herself, drawn by both art and the artist. Their connection was immediate, electric. Alfred believed in her completely, urging her to trust her own vision. With Alfred's support, Georgia painted as she had always dreamed. Her flowers grew larger and bolder, filling the canvas with color and movement. She magnified every curve and shadow, turning the heart of a bloom into a world of its own. People stared and whispered about the meanings. Some saw femininity, others something even more mysterious. But Georgia only smiled. "I paint what I see," she said. "I paint what I feel." Though New York brought her fame, it was not the city's towers or crowds that truly called to her. It was the quiet. It was the wild. In the year 1929, Georgia traveled to New Mexico, where the sky stretched wider than any dream, and the red cliffs stood ancient and unyielding. Here, animal bones bleached by the sun littered the ground. Shadows danced across mesas and mountains. Georgia felt something awaken deep inside her. She returned again and again, wandering the open desert, collecting rocks and bones, chasing the changing colors of dawn and dusk. The dry wind, the silence, the emptiness, these became her friends, her teachers. She painted skulls and flowers, sunlit mesas and shifting skies, making the quiet of the desert loud and bold for all to see. Eventually, Georgia made New Mexico her true home. She lived at Ghost Ranch, surrounded by hills and wind, painting from sunrise to sunset. Alone, but never lonely, she found endless inspiration in the land around her. Her days began before dawn, watching the first gold creep over the rocks. Evenings faded in lavender and blue, the desert growing silent again. She painted the desert not as an empty place, but as a land full of movement and spirit, a place where bones and flowers, rocks and sky, all whispered stories if you listened. She saw beauty in what others overlooked. The curves of a skull, the sweep of a dry river, the gentle fold of a petal, the dance of light and shadow. Georgia was not just an artist, she was a pioneer. In a world ruled by men, she built her own path, refusing to let anyone tell her how to paint, how to live, or how to see. She loved deeply, lived simply, and guarded her solitude. "To see takes time," she once said, and she meant it. Through her art, she invited the world to slow down, to look closely, to find the wonder hiding in plain sight. Even as age crept in and her eyesight faded, Georgia never stopped creating. She tried sculpture, mixed new colors, found new shapes. She painted well into her 90s. The land, the sky, the flowers, these were her lifelong companions, her endless inspiration. Georgia O'Keeffe passed away in the year 1986 at the age of 98. But her legacy lives wherever people pause to marvel at a flower's heart, a wide horizon, or the simple, fierce beauty of the earth. Her paintings still breathe on museum walls. Her colors still dance beneath gallery lights, and her spirit, the spirit of independence, curiosity, and resilience, shines through every brushstroke. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let Georgia's world fill your dreams. Fields of color, soft petals opening in silence, red rocks burning beneath the sky. Remember her words. I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way. And so she spoke, and still speaks, to all who are willing to listen and see. Tonight, we do not wander through quiet gardens or gentle lamplight. Tonight, you hear the sharp click of heels on marble. You stand beneath the high ceilings of Parliament, where power is cold and bright as steel. This is the story of Margaret Hilda Thatcher, the woman who never waited for an invitation, but took her place at the table, and sometimes turned the table over entirely. She was not born into silk or privilege. She was born Margaret Roberts in the market town of Grantham, Lincolnshire, on a brisk October day in the year 1925. Her father, Alfred, ran the corner grocery shop and served as mayor, a man of principle, frugality, and Baptist faith. He believed in hard work, discipline, and speaking plainly. He raised his daughters to do the same. There were more chapels than cinemas in their town and more chores than dreams. But young Margaret did not mind. She was focused. She was hungry. At school, she stood out, not for fashion or flirtation, but for facts and ambition. She excelled in mathematics, chemistry, Latin. Other girls giggled about dances. Margaret joined the debating society. By 17, she had fixed her gaze on Oxford, not just to attend but to conquer. She arrived at Somerville College in 1943, determined to master chemistry, but even more determined to master the art of influence. While others fretted over exams, Margaret was already thinking in speeches and policies. She became president of the Oxford University Conservative Association in 1946, her voice crisp, her arguments sharper than ever. The world after the Second World War was leaning left, but Margaret stood her ground, certain that individual responsibility and free enterprise were the way forward. She ironed her blouses, practiced her accent, and made herself impossible to ignore. In 1951, Margaret married Denis Thatcher, a businessman and war veteran. He was steady, loyal, content to stand beside her as she climbed ever higher. Margaret ran for office twice and lost. She did not give up. In 1959, she won a seat in Parliament, representing Finchley. She was already a mother of twins, a dedicated wife, and now one of the few women in a sea of suits. She held her ground. In 1970, she became Secretary of State for Education and Science. Her first national controversy arrived quickly. She cut free milk for schoolchildren over the age of 7. The press howled. They called her Thatcher the Milk Snatcher. But she did not flinch. She stood by her decision and kept moving. By 1975, Margaret did what no one thought possible. She challenged the leader of her own party and won. She became the first woman ever to lead a major political party in Britain. The press did not know what to make of her. Too proper, too cold, too female, too fierce. She did not care. She studied policy papers at 5 in the morning. She practiced speeches until her voice dropped lower, stronger, more commanding. She wore blue suits and brooches and wielded her handbag like a scepter. The Soviet press named her the Iron Lady. She wore the title like armor. In 1979, after a wave of strikes and turmoil, Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, the first woman to ever hold the office. Britain was battered by inflation, unemployment, angry unions. Her answer was radical. She unleashed a wave of privatization, deregulation, and free markets. She sold off public housing, broke the power of the unions, cut government spending, raised interest rates. To her supporters, she was a savior. To her enemies, a destroyer. She did not blink. In April of 1982, Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, a scrap of land thousands of miles from London. Many called for negotiation. Margaret sent warships. 10 weeks later, Britain won. Her popularity soared. She was no longer just Prime Minister. She was an icon. Strong, ruthless, uncompromising. Her second term was marked by battles with coal miners and the infamous poll tax. Protests exploded, communities fractured. An IRA bomb nearly killed her at a party conference in Brighton. She gave her speech the next morning, unbroken. But her iron style, once seen as refreshing, grew cold even among allies. In 1990, her own party forced her out. She left Downing Street in tears. After politics, Margaret wrote books, gave speeches, traveled. Denny's passed away in 2003. Margaret followed in 2013 at the age of 87. Her funeral drew both royalty and protesters, her legacy a battlefield. Some say she saved Britain. Others say she broke it. She made it clear that a woman could wield power, though not always gently. She transformed the economy and society, but the scars remain. She was not warm, but she was real. She proved you do not have to be liked to lead. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, listen for the echo of Margaret's steps, clicking down the marble corridors. Remember, the world does not always belong to the gentle or the liked. Sometimes it belongs to the determined, to those who do not look away. Let her story remind you that ambition is not shameful, that strength and femininity are not opposites, that power is not always soft. Sleep well, little rebel, and wake with purpose. Settle in, dreamer. Let the light dim around you. Let every worry slip away for a moment and listen close. This is not a story that shouts. It leans close, looks you in the eye, and says, "You are seen." This is the story of Oprah Winfrey, the woman who turned pain into power, who listened so well that millions learned how to listen to themselves. Oprah Gail Winfrey was born on a winter day in late January. The year was 1954. Her first home was a wooden shack in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, a place where the floor was dirt, the walls thin, and the world small. Her mother, Vernita, was just a teenager, working day and night. There were no books, no soft blankets, just survival and the sound of her grandmother's prayers. Even as a tiny child, Oprah filled every quiet with words. She asked questions, told stories to her dolls, talked to the chickens, talked to the sky. By 3 years old, she was standing in church, reciting Bible verses with the confidence of someone twice her age. Her grandmother saw that spark, the gift of words, and told Oprah, "Baby, if you can talk, you can change your life." But the world did not make it easy. As she grew, darkness crept into her story. At 9, Oprah was abused by a family member. The silence was heavy. At 14, after more pain and heartbreak, Oprah became pregnant and then lost her baby boy. Grief nearly swallowed her, but even in her worst nights, a tiny voice inside whispered, "This is not the end." Her mother sent her to live with her father Vernon in Nashville. He wasn't gentle, but he gave Oprah what she needed: structure, high standards, a desk, and a pile of books. Vernon made her read a book a week, memorize scripture, keep her grades high. She found her footing in school, joined the speech team, and with every competition, her voice grew stronger. At 17, Oprah won a scholarship to Tennessee State University. She studied communications and landed a job as the first black female news anchor at Nashville's television station. It was not easy. Producers told her she was too emotional. She didn't hide her feelings, she learned to use them. She brought her whole self to every story. Oprah moved to Baltimore in 1976, co-hosted a talk show, and discovered the magic of true conversation. She wasn't just asking questions, she was listening, feeling, connecting. Guests cried, laughed, shared secrets, and America leaned in. When she moved to Chicago in 1984 to host AM Chicago, the show soared to #1 in months. A year later, it was called The Oprah Winfrey Show. By 1986, Oprah was no longer just on television, she was television. Her show changed daytime forever. She brought in guests no one else would, survivors, outcasts, people whose stories had been hidden. Oprah sat with them, sometimes in silence, sometimes in tears, always with respect. She opened her own wounds on camera, letting others see their own pain reflected in her eyes. She told millions, "You are not alone." Oprah's power was never just the microphone. It was her ability to see and to heal. She talked about race, shame, forgiveness. She gave away cars, but more than that, she gave people permission to dream, to cry, to change. She started Oprah's book club, turning unknown authors into household names. She interviewed everyone, from Michael Jackson to Maya Angelou. She became not just a host, but a builder, founding Harpo Productions, producing films, launching her magazine, her network, her school for girls in South Africa. She faced criticism. Too commercial, too emotional, too influential. She was open about her struggles with weight, her choice not to marry or have children, her friendship with Gayle King, her love for her partner Stedman Graham. Oprah never played by other people's rules. She lived honestly, and millions found freedom in her example. When Oprah stood on the Golden Globe stage in 2018, her voice filled the room with hope. She spoke of justice, of the power of telling the truth, of a new day rising for girls everywhere. People wanted her to run for president. Oprah didn't need a new title. She already was a symbol of what was possible. After 25 years and 4,561 episodes, the Oprah Winfrey Show ended. But Oprah did not disappear. She built a school. She mentored. She wrote, produced, listened. She kept showing up for people who needed to be seen. Opera's life reminds us that pain is not the end of the story, that our voice can light a way for others, that what we survive can become what we give back to the world. "Turn your wounds into wisdom," she once said, and every day she did. So now, as you drift toward sleep, let Opera's story wrap you like a warm blanket. Remember, you are worthy, you are seen, you are not alone. Opera would want you to know that, and so do I. Close your eyes, dreamer. Tonight, you don't walk the earth, you float above it. Feel the gentle hum of engines, the slow rise through blue into black. On June 18, 1983, millions of eyes lifted to the sky as the Space Shuttle Challenger broke free from gravity. On board, strapped into her seat and steady as stone, was a 32-year-old physicist named Sally Ride. Calm eyes, practical voice, sharp mind, nothing about her asked for spectacle. The world watched. The headlines blared, "First American Woman in Space." But Sally shrugged off the titles. For her, the headlines were just noise. The real story was the math, the teamwork, the shuttle systems, doing the job and doing it well. Sally Kristen Ride was born in Los Angeles, California, in May of 1951. Her parents filled their home with books and quiet encouragement. Her father taught political science. Her mother counseled women in prison. Sally grew up in a house where curiosity was always welcome, and questions were never silly. She loved two things, science and tennis. By her teens, she ranked among the top players in the country and briefly thought about going pro. But the universe pulled her another way. Sally wanted to understand how things worked, why the stars shone, how the world spun. She studied at Stanford, earning degrees in English and physics, then a doctorate in physics, exploring the mysteries of X-rays and interstellar space. One day, a small ad in the campus paper changed her life. NASA was looking for new astronauts. For the first time ever, women could apply. Sally did. Out of over 8,000 hopefuls, she was one of just 35 chosen, one of only 6 women. She didn't care about being a trailblazer. She cared about learning, solving problems, preparing for the unexpected. She trained alongside men, learned to parachute, worked in weightlessness, passed every test, answered every challenge with cool, precise focus. NASA noticed. They liked her calm under pressure, her quick wit, her ability to make things work. Her first job at NASA was as Capcom, the voice on the ground talking to astronauts in space. Cool, steady, always clear. Then came the big call. She was chosen for the crew of SDS-7, the 7th Space Shuttle mission and Challenger's second flight. The media couldn't stop talking about her gender, asking if she'd cry in space, if she'd take makeup, if the experience would be too much. Sally shot back. "Why don't you ask Rick, my male crewmate, if he's planning to cry?" On launch day, Sally put on her blue jumpsuit, climbed aboard, and made history. She spent 6 days in orbit, deploying satellites, running experiments, and operating the shuttle's robotic arm, a job that required skill and nerves of steel. Her crewmates respected her. The mission was flawless. When Challenger touched down, Sally became a symbol not because she tried, but because she simply did her job brilliantly. After the flight, NASA hoped she'd become the new public face of space travel. Instead, Sally went back to work. She flew again in 1984 and trained for a third mission. But in 1986, the Challenger disaster struck. Sally felt the loss deeply. She knew, as few others could, what those astronauts had risked and lost. She joined the Rogers Commission, the team that investigated the tragedy. Sally read every document, listened to every testimony, and quietly pushed the truth into the final report. Many say her insistence on including technical warnings, the cold weather, the faulty O-rings, helped make the investigation honest. Sally never returned to space. She left NASA in 1987, became a professor at the University of California in San Diego, and made it her mission to inspire the next generation of scientists. She co-founded Sally Ride Science, wrote science books for children, and designed classroom materials to spark curiosity, especially for girls who wondered if science belonged to them, too. She lived quietly, with kindness and integrity. Sally never put her personal life on display. Only after her passing in 2012 did the world learn she'd shared nearly 3 decades with her partner, Tam O'Shaughnessy, making Sally not only a pioneer in space, but also the first known LGBTQ+ astronaut in U.S. history. Sally Ride died of pancreatic cancer at 61. The tributes came from presidents, astronauts, students, and teachers. She was remembered not just for being first, but for showing, through quiet brilliance and unshakable grace, that you do not have to be loud to be bold, that changing the world sometimes means simply doing your work and doing it well. So now, as you drift toward sleep, feel yourself floating like Sally once did, weightless, curious, free. Let her remind you, you don't have to shout to be heard, you don't have to claim the spotlight to make history. The strongest voices are sometimes the ones that work quietly and leave the world forever changed. Sleep now, little explorer. The earth is far below, the stars are waiting, and the sky, it's only the beginning. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine a world that doesn't start with knights or kings, but with a girl and a question. A girl named Elizabeth Jane Cochrane, born in the year 1864 in a small town called Cochrane's Mills, Pennsylvania. She was the 13th child in a family that stretched from one end of the table to the other, a family built on hope and soon on hardship. Her father died when she was young. Money grew scarce. But inside young Elizabeth, something fierce began to burn, a sense that the world wasn't always fair, and that sometimes the only way to change it was to speak up. In those days, a girl's voice was meant to be soft and her opinions quiet. But Elizabeth refused to be quiet. At 20 years old, she read a newspaper article claiming women should never leave the home. Furious, she wrote a bold, witty letter in reply, signing it "Lonely Orphan Girl." The editor was so struck by her words, he offered her a job. That's when she became Nelly Bly, a pen name borrowed from a popular song, and from that moment she was never ordinary again. At first, Nelly was assigned the typical women's columns, flower shows, fashion, tea parties. But Nelly wasn't interested in embroidery and etiquette. She wanted to see the world, to chase injustice, to dig into stories others were afraid to touch. She convinced her editor to send her to Mexico, where she wrote about poverty and dictatorship, describing what she saw with clarity and courage. She exposed corruption, angered officials, and when threatened with arrest, escaped home. But not before writing a book, 6 months in Mexico, that opened American eyes to suffering and injustice abroad. But Nelly wanted more. In New York, she walked into Joseph Pulitzer's World newspaper with a wild idea. What if she pretended to be insane and let herself be committed to a mental asylum? No one, especially not a woman, had ever dared to go undercover like this. Nelly checked into a boarding house, acted confused and erratic, and soon was declared insane by doctors. Within days, she found herself locked away on Blackwell's Island, where she saw horrors. Women left in freezing baths, fed rotten food, ignored or beaten by staff. Sane women trapped with no way out. For 10 days, Nelly became one of them, her eyes wide open, her heart breaking, her mind working. When her editors rescued her and published her story, 10 days in a madhouse, it shocked the nation. The city reformed its asylums. Money was sent. The public learned how easy it was to silence and forget women who simply didn't fit. Nelly had turned journalism into a force for justice. But Nelly didn't stop. In 1889, inspired by Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, she proposed another stunt. She'd circle the globe faster than any man, alone, with nothing but a handbag and her determination. The editors doubted. "A woman can't do that," they said. Nelly smiled, packed one small bag, and set off. She sailed across the Atlantic, rode trains through Europe and Asia, crossed deserts, bought a monkey in Singapore, and met Jules Verne himself. In every port, crowds gathered, telegraphs buzzed, and readers followed her every move. 72 days, 6 hours, and 11 minutes after she left, Nelly Bly returned to New York, smashing the record and capturing imaginations everywhere. She was celebrated in newspapers, on trading cards, in board games. But fame never changed her. She still wanted to dig deeper, to do more. She married Robert Seaman, an industrialist 40 years her senior, and after his death, ran his company with the same fierce will she brought to reporting. She improved workers' rights, introduced benefits, and became one of the first female industrialists in America. When betrayal by her managers brought the business down, she grieved, but kept going. During World War I, Nelly sailed to Europe to report from the front lines, one of the very first female war correspondents. She spoke with wounded soldiers, described the chaos and heartbreak of war, and shone a light on profiteers. Her reports were filled with both fire and compassion. Nelly Bly wrote until her last days, never backing down, never losing her sense of justice or adventure. She died in 1922 at 57, her name echoing in every newsroom and every corner of the world where a woman dares to chase a story. Her legacy isn't carved in stone. It lives in every investigative reporter, every woman's byline, every truth revealed in the face of power. Nelly Bly proved that with courage, questions, and a pen, One voice can change the world. So tonight, as you close your eyes, picture a train rushing through India. A woman leaning out the window, hair flying wild, notebook in hand, eyes full of dreams and defiance. She doesn't need a sword, just a question and the will to follow it anywhere. Good night, dreamer. May you wake ready to chase your own stories, no matter who says you can't. Close your eyes, dreamer. Tonight, our story doesn't begin in any palace or city, but beneath the wide, wild sky of the Rocky Mountains, where winds sing through pine and rivers carve the land. There, sometime in the late 1780s, a girl named Sacagawea was born into the Agadika band of the Lemhi Shoshone. People known for their horses, for their mountains, for their bond with earth and sky. Her name meant bird woman, and even her true story, like her name, drifts in the mists between memory and legend. Sacagawea grew up with sun on her skin, learning plants and animals, paths and stories. But her childhood was shattered when she was just 12. Raiders from the Hidatsa swept into her world, capturing Sacagawea and other children, carrying them hundreds of miles east to a village on the edge of the prairie. There, far from home, she learned new languages, Hidatsa, French, held on to her Shoshone memories, and survived. Still a teenager, she was traded or gambled away to a French-Canadian fur trapper, Toussaint Charbonneau, who made her his wife. Sacagawea's world had changed, but her spirit did not break. She became a bridge between peoples, learning, adapting, never forgetting where she came from. Then came the year 1804. The United States, still new and hungry for land, had just doubled in size with the Louisiana Purchase. President Thomas Jefferson sent explorers Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to map this wild, unknown territory, find a river to the Pacific, and meet the nations who lived there. Their journey would become one of legend, the core of discovery. As winter crept over the northern plains, the expedition built a fort near the frozen Missouri River. It was there that Lewis and Clark met Charbonneau and his young, very pregnant Shoshone wife. They realized instantly, if they hoped to cross the Rockies, they needed her. Sacagawea knew those passes, those rivers, those stars. She was just 16. 16, with a child nearly ready to be born. On a freezing February night in 1805, inside that log fort, Sacagawea gave birth to a baby boy, Jean-Baptiste, Pomp, as Clark would call him. 2 months later, she strapped her son to her back, stepped into the unknown, and set out with 33 men, 2 captains, and a journey written by destiny. They traveled by boat, by foot, by horse, across grasslands, through forests, over mountains. Sacagawea translated, negotiated, gathered food, recognized wild herbs, found clean water, remembered trails she had not walked since she was a child. When a boat nearly capsized, she dove into icy water, saving maps, medicines, supplies, all with her infant strapped to her back. The men watched in awe, knowing without her, the journey might end in disaster. As they neared the towering Bitterroot Mountains, the expedition faced its greatest test. They needed horses from the Shoshone to make the crossing. When Sacagawea was brought to the chief, she realized Miracle of miracles, he was her brother. Years had passed, but family and memory linked past and present. There were tears, gifts, reunion. Because of her, the expedition received the horses they so desperately needed. Through snow and storms, hunger and hope, they pressed on, finally reaching the blue sweep of the Pacific Ocean in November 1805. They built a fort on the Oregon coast, weathered a winter of wind and rain. Sacagawea, with her baby on her back, took part in decisions, advised on campsites and routes, her presence calming other tribes and the men she traveled beside. She had no vote, but her opinion was sought. She was not just a guide, but a sign of peace and possibility. Proof this was not a war party, but a journey of understanding. When at last they returned east, after more than 2 years across the continent, the men of the Corps received land and pensions. Sacagawea received nothing, no medal, no official thanks, only memories and stories whispered around fires. What became of her after? History is unsure. Some say she died young in the year 1812, far from her mountains. Others believe she lived long, returned to her people, raised her son, learned to read and write, and became a grandmother. Her son, Jean-Baptiste, traveled the world, spoke many languages, became a guide like his mother. But Sacagawea herself became a legend. For years, her name faded into the shadows. Yet as America learned to look back, to see not just the men with maps, but the woman who showed them the way, her story rose again. Today, her face appears on coins, her name on rivers and schools. But her true legacy is the quiet, unbreakable brilliance of a woman who walked step after step, mile after impossible mile, with a child on her back and courage lighting her path. So tonight, as you close your eyes, picture her walking under the stars, through mountain passes, silent and strong. She speaks softly, but when she does, rivers change course. Let Sacagawea's story remind you, sometimes the bravest journeys are quiet. Sometimes the greatest heroes do not carry swords, but hope. Good night, dreamer. May your dreams tonight be filled with moonlit trails, high mountain winds, and the gentle strength to keep moving forward, no matter how unknown the path. Take a slow walk with me tonight, not down a gold-lit corridor, but along the cracked sidewalks of Chicago's South Side. You pass corner stores glowing after dark, basketball hoops without nets, laughter spilling from windows, and dinner tables crowded into small rooms. In one of these rooms, a girl is learning the rhythm of family. Her name is Michelle LaVaughn Robinson. She was born on a January morning in the year 1964 in a cramped apartment above her aunt's place on Euclid Avenue. Outside, the world called her neighborhood too poor, too black. Inside, the Robinson home was full of structure, stories, and belief. Her father, Fraser, worked for the city water plant. He walked with canes, but never let illness slow him down or soften his dignity. Her mother, Marion, ran the household with quiet wisdom and sharp eyes, making sure her children understood what respect and discipline looked like. There wasn't much money, but there was something richer, expectations. Dinner was at the same time every night. If you were late, you ate alone. If you brought home anything but an A, there was a calm question. What happened? Michelle learned early that excellence was the baseline, not a bonus. She was a planner, a doer. Michelle organized her days, color-coded her school notes, practiced piano until her fingers ached. She was the girl in class whose hand shot up, who never stopped writing, who stayed up after midnight editing essays. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being ready, about never giving anyone a reason to doubt her. From the start, she felt the world's doubts anyway. She saw how easy it was for a girl like her, black, working class, ambitious, to be overlooked or dismissed. When a guidance counselor told her she wasn't Princeton material, Michelle didn't cry. She applied, got in, and went. She never took no as an answer if she believed yes was possible. At Princeton, she learned how different her world was. The place felt cold, elite, full of codes she didn't know. She studied sociology and African American studies because she wanted to understand why she felt like an outsider. She learned to hold her head high in rooms where she was often the only one like her. She graduated with honors. Next came Harvard Law, even bigger, even whiter, even less forgiving. But Michelle thrived. She knew how to work twice as hard, to meet every expectation, and to make space for herself, no matter how tight. Her first job was at a big Chicago law firm. She had the desk, the paycheck, the heels clicking down marble floors, but her soul was restless. The world expected her to be grateful, to stay in her lane. Michelle wanted more. And then one summer, a young intern arrived, late, awkward, with a funny name she could barely pronounce, Barack Obama. She was supposed to mentor him. Instead, she found a partner. He was all vision and questions, she was all plans and answers. Together, they built something strong. They fell in love. They married in 1992, but Michelle set the rules. She would keep her job, keep her name, keep her own path. When Barack's career took off, from state politics to the U.S. Senate, and then the wild leap of a presidential campaign, Michelle hesitated. Not because she doubted him, but because she understood what it would cost. Time apart, hard questions, the weight of being the first. When Barack was elected the 44th President of the United States, Michelle became the first black First Lady. The White House didn't come with instructions for a woman like her. But Michelle didn't shrink. She didn't settle for tea parties and photo ops. She rolled up her sleeves. She launched Let's Move, a campaign to fight childhood obesity, not with lectures, but with school gardens, dance parties, and Beyoncé. She championed military families, girls' education, youth mentorship. She filled the White House with poetry slams, science fairs, town halls for students who looked like her. Her speeches were strong, steady, full of hope, never shouting but always heard. The world saw her grace, but Michelle was honest about the toll. She wrote about loneliness, about marriage counseling, about the pressure of always having to prove yourself. Her memoir, Becoming, became a beacon for millions, proof that real strength is honest, not perfect. After leaving the White House in 2017, Michelle didn't vanish. She grew. She wrote books, launched podcasts, produced Netflix films, kept traveling, kept speaking, kept lifting others up. She's still that girl from the South Side, fiercely protective of her daughters, never afraid to roll her eyes or wear a cardigan, still believing in the power of a well-cooked meal, a good book, and an honest day's work. Michelle Obama's story is not about royalty. It is about grit, love, truth, and the quiet, everyday courage to take up space and make room for others. So now, as you close your eyes, remember her words. When they go low, we go high. Let them echo in your dreams, and when you wake, rise just a little taller. Close your eyes, dreamer. Step out onto a Hollywood balcony, the night air sharp and full of possibility. Somewhere below, the city glows, but we are not here for spotlights or polite applause. We're here for Katharine Hepburn, the woman who kicked off her shoes, lit a cigarette, and refused to ever sit quietly like any lady was supposed to. She was not Kate or Katie. She was Katharine. With an A, her voice was rough like New England winter, her cheekbones sharp as a challenge, her walk more of a dare than a glide. She didn't chase attention. She simply ignored the rules, and the world couldn't help but follow. She was born in Hartford, Connecticut, in May of 1907, in a house where girls debated at dinner, swam in the lake, and spoke their minds as loudly as they wished. Her mother, Katharine Hepburn, was a suffragist, a woman who marched for the vote and birth control rights. Her father, Thomas, was a doctor, a pioneer in public health. There was no room for shrinking violets or soft-voiced daughters here. Little Katharine was wild, climbing trees, cutting her hair short, racing through the world with a fearless kind of joy. But childhood did not last. When she was 13, Katharine found her beloved brother Tom dead, a tragic accident. Grief wrapped itself around her, heavy and private. For years, she shut the world out, using her brother's birthday as her own, carrying his memory everywhere. Slowly, theater drew her back. She went to Bryn Mawr College, not for the degree, but because her parents insisted she needed direction. But on stage, she found power. She discovered audiences listened hardest when she refused to play nice. When she graduated in 1928, she faced rejection after rejection, small parts, firings, a reputation for being difficult. Directors weren't sure what to make of her, but her energy was impossible to ignore. Broadway led to Hollywood. Hollywood was confused. She wore pants, refused makeup, drove her own car, never posed for cheesecake photos. She was too tall, too thin, too outspoken, too Hepburn. In 1933, her breakthrough came with Morning Glory. She won her first Oscar, tossed it in a drawer, and got back to work. Her early roles were women with steel in their spines and wit in their eyes. But then the tide turned. By the late 1930s, a trade paper called her box office poison. Too cold, they said, too smart, not likable. What did Katharine do? She bought out her own contract, fled to Broadway, and rebuilt herself from the ground up. She found the perfect comeback role, Tracy Lord in the Philadelphia Story. She owned the part, sold the rights to MGM, and demanded to star in the film. They hesitated. She insisted. The movie was a smash. Katharine was back. And then Spencer. Spencer Tracy, the slow-burning love of her life. They met in 1941, sparks flying. He was married, Catholic, private. She never tried to change him. She loved him fiercely and cared for him in his illness, even stepping away from her own career to be by his side. When he died in 1967, she grieved in silence. She never married, never had children, never apologized for a single thing. She worked for 60 years, collecting 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, a record still unbroken. She starred in legends, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, The African Queen, The Lion in Winter, on Golden Pond. She kept working into her 70s and 80s, the same fire in her gaze. She skipped most interviews, ridiculed those she did. She kept her Oscars near the kitchen sink, never let Hollywood define her, never let anyone take her picture without permission. In her later years, she finally let the world in a bit. She spoke about her life with sharp honesty and humor, gardened, fed squirrels by hand, described death as the next great adventure. She died in June of 2003, aged 96, in her Connecticut home. No spectacle, no crowds, just Katharine, gone as she lived on her own terms. Her legacy, though, lingers, bold, unbending, iconic. She showed women a different way to be strong, made it clear you could be brilliant and wild, soft and fierce all at once. She proved you could be alone and still completely whole. So dreamer, as you drift toward sleep, let Katharine's spirit curl around you, not as a diva, but as a force of nature who didn't bend, didn't beg, didn't blink. Maybe tomorrow you'll walk a little straighter, speak a little louder, or wear whatever makes you feel most like yourself. Because the world already has enough quiet girls. It needs a bit more Hepburn. Sleep well, darling renegade. You're in fierce company tonight. Close your eyes, dreamer. Tonight, let a gentle glow fill the darkness, like the blue light of radium in a quiet laboratory, or the warm lamp of someone working late into the night. This is the story of Marie Curie, a woman who illuminated not el isha yen aukeu, a elya kratkoi sha elya kade elya te, esya chama kratkoi, beutan Cyrillic letter 456, Ka DOSL Cyrillic letter 456, Dani Ka Cyrillic letter 456 Ve, Des Cyrillic letter 456, Vechate Cyrillic letter 456, Ka Elopetse Cyrillic letter 456, Ve, Ya Ka Cyrillic letter 456, Ve Cyrillic letter 456, Ele, Shchaope Cyrillic letter 456, Zna N ya M a Cyrillic letter 454 M yeje. She was born as Maria Skłodowska on a November day in the year 1867 in Warsaw, Poland. The youngest of 5 children in a family where ideas mattered more than gold, and evenings sparkled with stories and debates. Her father taught math and physics. Her mother ran a school. But childhood was not easy. Illness and poverty shadowed their home. When Maria was only 10, her mother died of tuberculosis. Still, she found comfort in learning, and her eyes burned with a curiosity that would never fade. Poland at the time was under Russian rule. Schools for girls, especially those who dreamed of science, were forbidden. But Maria would not be stopped. She attended secret classes at the Flying University, where lessons took place behind closed doors and dreams grew in whispers. It was there she promised herself. One day she would study science freely. In 1891, At the age of 24, she packed her hopes and moved to Paris. Life in the City of Light was cold and hungry. She lived in a tiny room with no heat, often eating only bread and tea. But Maria, now Marie, never lost focus. She studied at the Sorbonne, earning degrees in physics and mathematics, often at the very top of her class, even when most classmates were men. In Paris, she met Marie Curie, a gentle, thoughtful physicist whose passion for discovery matched her own. They became partners in science and in life, marrying in 1895. Their bond was built on respect, curiosity, and a shared joy in the mysteries of the world. Together, they set out to unlock one of the greatest secrets of their age: the invisible energy pulsing from uranium and other strange minerals. Their lab was little more than a shed, with cracked floors and leaking roofs, but inside it buzzed with hope. For years they ground, boiled, and sifted tons of ore. Their reward? 2 new elements: polonium, named for Marie's homeland, and radium, which glowed in the dark, brighter than anything the world had seen. Marie coined a new word for the phenomenon: radioactivity. Her work revealed that atoms themselves could release energy, a discovery that changed physics and chemistry forever, opening doors to medicine and new technologies. In 1903, Marie and Pierre, along with Henry Becquerel, received the Nobel Prize in Physics. Marie was the first woman ever to win the Nobel. She was praised, and sometimes doubted, by a world unaccustomed to seeing women at the frontiers of science. Then heartbreak. In 1906, Pierre died suddenly in a street accident, leaving Marie alone with their 2 daughters and a broken heart. But even in grief, she found purpose. She took over his position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first female professor there, and continued their research. Her determination paid off. In 1911, Marie Curie was awarded a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for isolating pure radium and discovering polonium. To this day, she remains the only person to have won Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. But Marie's genius was not only for discovery, it was for service. When World War I erupted, she designed mobile X-ray units, little Curies, that traveled to battlefields to help doctors find and treat wounded soldiers. With her daughter Iron, she trained hundreds of medics, saving countless lives with science and compassion. All the while, she worked without fully knowing the risks. The glowing light of radium was beautiful, but deadly. Years of exposure would slowly sap her health. Yet Marie pressed on, convinced that knowledge and discovery were worth any sacrifice. She died on July 4th, 1934, at the age of 66. She was buried alongside Pierre. Decades later, their ashes were placed in the Pantheon in Paris. She was the first woman to be honored there for her own achievements. Marie Curie's legacy is radiant and real. Her work led to treatments for cancer, new insights into matter and energy, and inspired countless girls and boys to dream of science. Her name graces schools, hospitals, research centers across the world. She once said, "One never notices what has been done. One can only see what remains to be done." Her words are a reminder that discovery is a path with no finish line. So tonight, let the story of Marie Curie light a small lamp within you. Let her courage and brilliance guide your dreams, reminding you that even in the darkest times, knowledge is a flame, and no obstacle is too great for a mind set alight with wonder. Close your eyes, dreamer. Let the world grow quiet around you and imagine ancient Alexandria, the beating heart of learning, where marble libraries touched the sky and the Mediterranean whispered secrets to the shore. In that city of light and scrolls, in the late 4th century, a girl named Hypatia was born. Her story is not just about knowledge. It is about courage, freedom, and the will to keep the flame of reason alive, even when the world turned dark. Hypatia was born around the year 360, daughter to Theon, a mathematician and philosopher who saw in his daughter a mind as bright as any sun. While most girls learned how to sew or serve tea, Hypatia learned numbers, stars, and the secrets of logic. Her father did not shield her from ideas. Instead, he opened every door, teaching her mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy as if the world were hers to shape. As a young scholar, Hypatia traveled far from home, crossing seas to Athens and Rome, learning from wise men and sharing her own insights. She embraced the teachings of Neoplatonism, a philosophy that celebrated logic, harmony, and the beauty of the cosmos. To Hypatia, numbers and stars were not just puzzles. They were windows to the divine. By the time she returned to Alexandria, Hypatia's reputation shone brighter than any lighthouse. She became the head of the great Platonic school, gathering students from every land, women and men, rich and poor, teaching in the open under the sun, her voice calm and clear. Her lessons were not secrets whispered in shadows, but invitations for all to think, to question, to wonder. She wrote and lectured on mathematics, expanded on Euclid's elements, making geometry easier to understand. She improved the astrolabe, a tool for mapping the stars and measuring the sky. She explored numbers and algebra, pushing mathematics forward. Her mind was so respected that even Roman governors and political leaders sought her advice, trusting her wisdom and fairness. But Alexandria was changing. The ancient world was shifting. Christianity, once persecuted, was now the empire's power. Tensions rose between old and new beliefs, between reason and fear. Hypatia, though not a politician, became a symbol, a beacon of the ancient world's love for knowledge, reason, and science. To some, she was a threat. Rumors spread. Some called her a sorceress, others a heretic. She was close to Orestes, the Roman governor, who found himself in bitter conflict with Cyril, the powerful Christian bishop of Alexandria. In a city on edge, reason itself became a target. One spring day in the year 415, Hypatia's journey ended. A mob, driven by fanaticism, pulled her from her chariot, dragged her through the streets, and silenced her forever. Her death was brutal. It marked not just the end of a life, but the end of an era, when the great library's light dimmed, and the voices of inquiry were drowned by shouts of fear. Yet even as darkness fell, Hypatia's legacy glowed on. Her name survived centuries of silence, spoken in whispered admiration by those who would not let her be forgotten. She became a symbol for wisdom, for courage, for the right to ask questions, even when the answers are dangerous. Today, craters on the moon bear her name. Asteroids and schools remember her spirit. Mathematicians, philosophers, and dreamers still draw strength from her story. A story of brilliance and bravery, of refusing to bow before ignorance. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine walking through the grand halls of Alexandria's library, scrolls upon scrolls, the air rich with knowledge. Picture Hypatia among the marble columns, teaching, reasoning, daring to think. Let her remind you. To ask questions is never wrong. To search for truth is the greatest journey. And the flame of wisdom can never truly be extinguished. Sleep well, dear dreamer. Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. Close your eyes, dreamer. Picture the hush of a Kolkata night, narrow alleys, the shuffle of bare feet, the muffled cries of pain, and the soft swish of a simple cotton sari against tired skin. In the center of the world's suffering, where others turned away, stood a tiny woman dressed in white and blue, her steps quiet, but her presence enormous. She was not a queen, not a doctor, not a politician, just Mother Teresa, the woman who believed God could be found among the forgotten. She was born as Gangsa Bajaksiu on an August day in the year 1910 in Skopje, in today's North Macedonia. Gangsa means flower bud in Albanian, a name as gentle as her spirit. Her childhood was marked by faith, family, and sudden loss. Her father died when she was just 8, possibly poisoned for his political activism. Her mother, Dranophile, became the center of the family, a pillar of generosity and dignity who taught her children, if you have to go without, you do not refuse the poor. By 12, Gangsa felt the first pull toward a life of service. By 18, she left her home forever to join the Sisters of Loreto, an Irish order with missions in India. She took the name Teresa after Thales of Lycia, the Little Flower, a saint who preached that holiness could be found in humble acts. She trained in Dublin, then sailed across the world to Kolkata, a city brimming with beauty and misery. At first, she taught history and geography at a girls' school, eventually becoming headmistress. Her students loved her. She wore the strict black and white habit of her order, her life marked by discipline and prayer. But beyond the school's walls, the city groaned under the weight of famine, refugees, disease, and death. In 1946, during a train ride to Darjeeling, everything changed. Teresa felt what she would call a call within a call, an overwhelming vision, a sense that Jesus wanted her to leave the convent and go serve the poorest directly. She traded the safety of her order for a simple white sari with blue borders, the kind worn by Kolkata's poorest women. She had no money, no backing, just faith and empty hands. She learned basic medicine, bathed wounds, comforted the dying, taught children to read by writing in the dirt. Many called her mad, a European woman living in the slums, serving lepers and the dying. But slowly, others joined her. In 1950, she founded the Missionaries of Charity. The mission was simple: serve those nobody else would touch, the hungry, the crippled, the blind, the unloved, the outcast. Her nuns wore the same humble saris, worked without pay, and often without sleep, moving quietly through a world that often forgot to care. Her work grew into homes for the dying, orphanages, leper colonies, AIDS hospices, and soup kitchens across continents. She became a symbol of service, of faith, of relentless compassion. Presidents and popes sought her out. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. And yet, she never kept praise for herself. "I am just a pencil in God's hand," she'd say. But her sainthood was not smooth or simple. Critics questioned the conditions in her homes, the lack of pain medicine, the austerity, the focus on suffering over healing. They challenged her alliances, her views on abortion, contraception, and divorce. She was not progressive, not political. She was, by her own words, Catholic first in all ways. The world saw her as a living saint, but her private letters told a harder story. After her death, raw, honest words came to light. Mother Teresa confessed to years, even decades, of spiritual emptiness. She wrote of feeling abandoned by God, of praying and hearing only silence, of smiling when she felt only darkness inside. "There is so much contradiction in my soul," she wrote. But still she showed up, day after day, choosing love and service, even when faith felt cold and lonely. Mother Teresa died on September 5, 1997, at 87 years old. Her body lay in state in India, a nation that called her one of its own. In 2003, she was beatified by Pope John Paul II, and in 2016 canonized as Saint Teresa of Kolkata. But titles are not the point. She was never chasing sainthood. She was chasing pain, finding it, kneeling beside it, holding the hand of whoever needed her most. Whether you see her as a saint or a complicated soul, her life was a rebellion against indifference, a stubborn, daily choice to care. So as you drift into sleep, remember the tiny woman in a sari, hands gently washing wounds, smile costing her more than the world will ever know. Let her remind you, compassion is not clean, faith does not always feel good, service is not glamorous. But love, chosen again and again, can become something holy. Sleep well, dear soul. May your hands be gentle, your heart brave, and your spirit unafraid of the dark. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine the rattle of prison bars, the scratch of a pen against thin paper, the ache of hunger echoing through hollow ribs. Picture a woman in a dark dress, corset tight, eyes sharp with purpose. Her knuckles bruised, her speeches smudged with ink, her spirit unbreakable. This is not a gentle story. This is the story of Emmeline Pankhurst, the woman who did not ask history to change, but dragged it forward, sometimes kicking and screaming. She was born Emmeline Gooden on a summer day in 1858 in Moss Side, Manchester. Her family cared about ideas, talked of justice, progress, equality. But at the dinner table, daughters were taught to play piano, sons to debate law. Her mother was a quiet feminist, her father a radical liberal, yet practical equality stopped at their doorstep. But Emmeline was restless, more flame than flower. At 14, her mother took her to her first suffrage meeting. She watched a woman speak without apology, strong, smart, impossible to ignore. Something shifted deep inside her. A mission was planted. She longed for university, but her schooling ended in Paris, at a progressive finishing school, where she learned more from the history of revolution than from French grammar. She came home with sharper eyes and less patience for waiting. In Manchester, Emmeline threw herself into social causes. She volunteered, organized, observed. She married Richard Pankhurst, a lawyer twice her age, but an ally and true believer in women's rights. He wrote laws to help women own property. And with him, Emmeline built a home alive with debate, children, and visitors who dreamed of a better world. They were partners in life and activism, Richard never asking her to shrink or hide her mind. After Richard died in 1898, Emmeline grieved and then stood taller. By 1903, tired of slow progress and empty promises, she founded the Women's Social and Political Union, the WSPU. Their motto, "Deeds, not words." Enough talk. It was time for action. Her daughters Christabel, Sylvia, and Adela joined her. Their protests were loud, smart, and theatrical rallies, window smashing, chaining themselves to railings, hunger strikes in prison. The world watched. The government cracked down. In prison, suffragettes were force-fed by brutal means, tubes down their throats, milk poured in as punishment. Emmeline was arrested over a dozen times. Each release left her thinner but harder, and her resolve grew. We are here not because we are lawbreakers, but in our efforts to become lawmakers, she told the world. Her movement split over class and strategy. Sylvia, her daughter, wanted to fight for all women, especially the working class. Emmeline focused fiercely on one goal, the vote, above all. Their rift was deep, never fully healed. Adela left for Australia. Christabel stayed close, strategic and loyal, but even she sometimes felt the strain. When World War I broke out, Emmeline shocked many by suspending militant suffrage activities, urging women to support the war. She believed women's patriotism would earn public trust, and after the war, their reward. Women filled factories, drove ambulances, ran hospitals. When the war ended, so did patience for excuses. In 1918, women over 30 with property won the right to vote. In 1928, with Emmeline old and ill but still unbowed, the law changed again. All women over 21 could finally vote, equal to men. A few weeks later, Emmeline Pankhurst died. Her funeral was a sea of purple, white, and green. Old suffragettes marched, their medals catching the sun. She had not been an easy hero. She made enemies, alienated friends, broke rules. But she had dragged history forward inch by inch until it changed. Now her face is carved in stone outside the parliament that once barred her. The right to vote, the very thing she was imprisoned for, is yours, dreamer, to use, to defend, to never take for granted. Her story is in every signature, every protest, every voice that says, "I matter." So sleep now, soft rebel. The march is quiet tonight, but the echo of her boots remains. Emmeline didn't wait for her turn, she made it. May you wake tomorrow and do the same. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine a world of swirling fog and gaslit streets, where carriages rattle past tall windows and every shadow hides both mystery and invention. It's the early 19th century, a time of steam, silk, and secret ambition. Here, among parlors filled with piano music and hushed talk, a girl is born who will one day glimpse the digital future before anyone else can even imagine it. Her name is Ada Augusta Byron, but history knows her as Ada Lovelace. She was born on a December day in 1815, daughter of two extremes. Her father, Lord Byron, was a poet whose name was whispered with awe and scandal. Her mother, Annabella, was determined, logical, and coldly brilliant. Their marriage dissolved in thunder and tears before Ada could remember a father's hug. Her mother, haunted by Byron's wildness, raised Ada with mathematics as her armor. Ada's world was filled with equations, logic puzzles, and strict tutors, her days mapped in numbers, not poetry. But you cannot crush imagination in a true Byron. Ada called her approach poetical science, a weaving together of logic and wonder, a way of seeing numbers not as rigid lines, but as shapes that moved and danced, alive with potential. At 17, Ada met Charles Babbage, a scientist and inventor who dreamed of engines made from brass and steel. He was working on the difference engine, a mechanical calculator, and then the even bolder analytical engine, something that could follow instructions, process data, and maybe think. Where others saw levers and gears, Ada saw possibilities. A machine that could not only calculate, but compose music, paint pictures, create worlds. Babbage called her the enchantress of numbers. She did more than translate his ideas. She expanded them, wrote pages of detailed notes on the analytical engine, adding what would become the first computer algorithm. The year was 1843, and the world had not even imagined electricity could whisper through wires, let alone carry thoughts or images. But Ada did. In her famous Note G, she wrote instructions for how the engine might calculate a sequence. Her lines of code born before there were computers to run them. She saw further still. Ada wrote that the analytical engine could, one day, create music or art, anything that could be translated into symbols. She compared the engine to the Jacquard loom, weaving patterns from punched cards, just as her machine might weave ideas. But the world around Ada was not ready. They shelved her work, not with rejection but indifference, refusing to see what she had done. She died at 36, as young as her father, leaving behind children, questions, and boxes of letters few would read. Her final wish: to be buried beside Byron, to close the circle of her poetic and mathematical bloodline. For more than a century, Ada's genius slept quietly. Only in the 1950s, as real computers came to life, did researchers open her notes and marvel at how she had seen the future, written it out in ink, and called it beautiful. Ada Lovelace is now remembered as the first computer programmer, the woman whose dreams sparked every algorithm that hums in our world today. But she was more than that. She was a bridge between poetry and code, art and logic, dream and calculation. She dared to imagine that the most rigid machine could sing, and that the wildest mind could also be precise. So tonight, as your thoughts drift and your breath grows slow, imagine Ada in candlelight, diagrams spread across her lap, fingers stained with ink and possibility. Imagine her whispering to a future she alone could see. Why not both? Let her story remind you that your curiosity, your strangeness, your wildest ideas are exactly what tomorrow might need most. Sleep well, dear dreamer. The code is already humming quietly just for you. Close your eyes, dreamer. Let your mind wander to a London laboratory in the 1950s. A room filled with quiet ticking clocks, low yellow lamplight, the clink of glassware, and the dry scent of chalk dust. There, hunched over a microscope, stands Rosalind Franklin. She's not here for applause. She's here for answers, precise, stubborn, and quietly brilliant. Rosalind was born on a summer day in 1920 in Notting Hill, London. Her family was well off, Jewish, thoughtful, never loud. Her father, Ellis, was a banker. Her mother, Muriel, believed books and discipline mattered as much as kindness. Rosalind was the second of 5 children. Even as a girl, she was different, not for dolls and stories, but for order, puzzles, and truth. Her teachers noticed her precision, her quiet way of seeing straight to the heart of any problem. She went to St. Paul's Girls' School, a rare place that actually taught science to girls. Imagine that, classrooms where she was told to think, not just behave. She thrived. Cambridge University followed Newnham College in the shadow of a world at war. She studied physical chemistry, a field where the beauty was hidden deep in the structure of things. She loved it. By her 20s, Rosalind was already doing research most people wouldn't even understand. She earned her doctorate for work on coal and carbon, discovering secrets inside ordinary black lumps, secrets that mattered for everything from gas masks to batteries. The war needed smart minds, so industries opened doors that once would have been locked to a young woman. In 1951, she moved to King's College London. There, she joined a project using X-ray diffraction, a magical, mysterious method to photograph the invisible patterns at the heart of life itself. Rosalind's lab was dim, thick with smoke and silence, not a place for small talk. She worked alone, late into the night, adjusting machinery, capturing images no one had ever seen. And then she did it. Photograph 51, a ghostly black cross, fuzzy and perfect, the shadow of DNA's double helix. To most, it was just a blurry X-ray. To Rosalind, it was a map, a proof, a secret unlocked. But recognition, dreamer, did not follow. A colleague, Maurice Wilkins, showed her photograph to James Watson without her knowing. Watson and Francis Crick built the now-famous DNA model, published their work, and won the Nobel Prize. Rosalind's name was left in the footnotes, if mentioned at all. It wasn't just a theft, it was erasure. Rosalind didn't rage. She didn't plot revenge. She simply moved on. She left King's College for Birkbeck, where she pivoted to viruses, polio, tobacco mosaic, RNA. She became a pioneer in a whole new field, making discoveries decades ahead of her time. Rosalind wasn't one for drama or romance. She liked hiking, laughter, and clear thinking. She kept her friendships close and her ambitions closer. She worked through pain, through cancer, through every barrier placed in her way. She died in 1958, just 37 years old, before her real impact could be measured. But the story didn't end there. As years passed, her role in DNA's discovery became known. Books were written, statues raised, labs named for her. In 2020, a Mars rover was named Rosalind Franklin. The world finally saw her as more than a shadow behind a famous photograph. Photograph 51 lives on, the blurry, beautiful truth that changed science forever. Rosalind's legacy is not just in textbooks or awards, but in the stubborn, shining clarity of her work. She didn't need the spotlight, she needed the truth. So tonight, as you fall asleep, remember her. The quiet storm, the mind that saw patterns no one else could see. Let her remind you that real brilliance isn't always loud, and recognition may arrive late, but truth has a way of shining through. Sleep well, curious soul. There is more brilliance ahead, waiting to be found, maybe even by you. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine a misty English morning, fields speckled with dew, narrow lanes winding past stone cottages, and the soft hush of a village still waking up. In one of these quiet places, on a December day in the year 1775, a baby girl was born, Jane Austen. Few could have guessed that this gentle, clever child would someday change the world of literature forever. With nothing but her wit, her insight, and a quill, Jane was the seventh of 8 children in the lively Austen family. Her father, Reverend George Austen, was a clergyman with a mind full of books and curiosity. Her mother, Cassandra, was quick-witted, a storyteller by nature, passing on both her sharp humor and her warmth to her daughter. The Austen house was always alive with conversation, children's laughter, debates, stories shared by firelight. Jane and her beloved sister, also named Cassandra, were inseparable, their bond woven into every chapter of Jane's life. Unlike most girls of her time, Jane was allowed, encouraged to learn. She briefly attended boarding school, but most of her education came from her father's overflowing library. Jane devoured everything: Shakespeare, poetry, the news of the day, travel stories, history, novels new and old. While other girls practiced embroidery or dance, Jane was writing her first stories. Funny, sharp, often a bit rebellious. Each page alive with her keen observations of the people around her. By her late teens, Jane was already creating whole worlds, drafting the stories that would one day become Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Northanger Abbey. But for a young woman in 18th century England, publishing a novel was almost unthinkable. Respectable women married, managed households, kept their opinions quiet. Jane did not fit the mold. Her early novels circulated in secret among friends and family, read aloud in sitting rooms full of laughter and suspense. It wasn't until 1811, after years of patient revision, that Sense and Sensibility was finally published. Even then, it was simply signed by a lady. The world didn't know her name, but her voice was unmistakable, sharp, compassionate, unafraid to poke at society's rules. Pride and Prejudice followed 2 years later, originally titled First Impressions. Its opening line is now legendary, and its heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, a symbol of intelligence, courage, and the power to choose one's own path. Through Elizabeth and Darcy, Jane Austen created a love story that was also a battle of wits, a dance of pride, vulnerability, and discovery. Readers were captivated not just by the romance, but by the clear-eyed way Austen revealed the world of class, wealth, and expectation. Jane kept writing. Mansfield Park asked tough questions about morality and class. Emma introduced readers to a heroine both flawed and fiercely independent. Persuasion, written in her final years, explored second chances and quiet, enduring love. Through it all, Jane's heroines, Elizabeth, Elinor, Emma, Anne, remained brilliant, imperfect, yearning for more than just a suitable marriage. They sought happiness, meaning, respect. Despite her literary achievements, Jane's own life was simple and quietly brave. She never married, though she knew both love and disappointment. There was Tom Lefra, a romance stifled by family and fortune. Jane made peace with her choices, pouring her dreams and wisdom into her books. She lived modestly, cared deeply for her family, and wrote even as her health declined. Jane Austen died at 41. Her final novel, Sanditon, left unfinished. She was buried in Winchester Cathedral, her headstone describing only her virtues, not her genius. During her lifetime, her name was never on the covers of her novels. Yet after her death, her reputation only grew, her books cherished by readers, adapted into films, plays, and retellings in dozens of languages. Today, Jane Austen's stories still live in the hearts of millions. Her characters, Elizabeth Bennet, Emma Woodhouse, Anne Elliot, are more than heroines. They are friends, guides, reminders of how cleverness and kindness, resilience and love can change everything. Through her words, Austen gave voice to the hopes, fears, and dreams of women and men across centuries. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine her. Sitting at her small writing desk by candlelight, ink-stained fingers, a glimmer of mischief in her eye. She's quietly crafting words that will outlast her. Words that still whisper to us about tenderness, courage, and the beauty of thinking for yourself. Sleep well, dear dreamer. Remember, sometimes the greatest revolutions begin in silence, with nothing but a pen, a mind, and a heart unafraid to feel.